Tolkien takes the series of anthologies, denoted by the colors of their covers, of fairy stories published in the late 19th century by Andrew Lang as typical of the various errors and misunderstandings that proliferated about fairy stories in the late Victorian period, and which it was one of the goals of his essay to correct. Of course, the focus on Andrew Lang is most obviously explained by the fact that On Fairy Stories was given by Tolkien as part of the Andrew Lang series on folklore at the University of St. Andrews, but that did not, in characteristic Tolkien fashion, prevent him from criticizing the work of the man in whose honor the lectures were named. First and foremost, Tolkien objects to the popular notion that fairy stories are primarily meant for children, that what makes a fairy story is the presence in it of diminutive supernatural beings, or fairies, and that these stories inhabit a sort of primitive dream world that we modern men and women have outgrown, making them again stories really only fit for children. First and foremost, fairy stories, Tolkien insists, are for adults. He questions whether children even have any special liking or attraction to fairy stories. In his own experience, having been, of course, a child himself and also the father of 4 children in turn, he has found that children do not have a special taste for make believe, but rather want to know whether what they are reading or hearing is real or true. Tolkien mentions that as a child, he was far more interested in subjects like history, language, astronomy, and botany than in so-called fairy tales. Children, he asserts, have a far greater desire to know what is real and true than adults, especially modern adults, give them credit for. This indicates that modern adaptations of ancient fairy stories often miss the mark with children because they assume that fairy stories must be about make believe and not about reality and truth. The second error Tolkien sees in popular modern adaptations of old fairy stories and the way they are understood is that previous generations, especially the Victorians, assumed that what makes these stories fairy stories is the presence of certain kinds of beings. Fairies, usually, as was mentioned, of a diminutive and delicate nature. Tolkien argues, however, that what gives a successful fairy story its unique charm and power is the entire setting of the story itself, the world in which it takes place. The world of a good or successful fairy story is a perilous realm in which strange, though not absurd, things can and do happen.